Hi pals, it's me, Artie, they them pronouns only, and this week I watched Sam Thompson's documentary on ADHD. If you've been here for a little while, you know I enjoy watching reality TV generally, but also I watch I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here pretty much every year. I've done this for the last, I don't even know how many years, at least the last 5 or 6. And this year Sam Thompson is on I'm a Celebrity. I've never seen Made in Chelsea. I think I've seen maybe some other reality TV shows he's been in. I'm pretty sure he was in the Celebrity SAS I watched. I do recognise his face, but I can't really think exactly where. But watching I'm a Celebrity, my ADHD radar was going off. So I was really curious to see whether he is a diagnosed ADHD or not. So when I googled it, I found this documentary he made. I think he made it last year, but it came out this year. So I thought I'd watch it. I thought it was like a documentary series rather than just a singular documentary, because some things I read online, it made it sound like there were like multiple episodes, but there weren't. It was just this one. And luckily I could watch it on E4, Channel 4, whatever it is, the online streaming Channel 4. But there were just so many things in his behaviour and the way he interacts with other people that really screamed ADHD. So I was really interested to see if I was right, and I was. This documentary was actually really interesting, and I was actually quite impressed with how it was created and put out. In the introduction, he is talking about like all the background, that when he's having conversations with people or doing things, he has always got this like very chaotic internalized monologue that makes him feel like he's not really ever present in a moment because his brain's always thinking about a million other things, which is a really big part of my ADHD experience as well, that actually led to me thinking it was anxiety. I do have anxiety. Considering I was convinced I didn't, I do now. That's a different topic though. I may approach that another day. But it was just really interesting to hear other people who were like another person who wasn't sure if they had ADHD or not talk about these kinds of things. But he also talks about how he was worried that if he did take medication for ADHD, that it would kind of kill his creativity, kill his personality, etc. And then the next bit we see is that the documentary filming team turn up and he forgot they were coming that day. And I don't know whether it's the producer or whatever whoever it is that does that, but they were like, I sent you a bunch of text messages to say that we were on the way, do you not open your text messages? He was like, no. The background is he's turned 30 and he has had a lot of people mentioning to him, do you have ADHD? Or I think you have ADHD. And as he's talking about these things, there's a little bit of like B-roll as well going on in between, or as he's talking. He is running late to a job. He almost forgot his wallet before he left the house. Didn't feed the cats. Didn't get his trousers that he needed. And his comment was, oh, this is like a really good day. Like, I feel like I'm quite on it. And then he just goes, oh, one sock? He just pulls a singular sock out of his bag, like, and yeah, he's not much older than me, like a couple of years. He was saying, you know, kids in the 90s, it was like only a handful of kids were diagnosed, but the statistics are more like 1 in 30 people have ADHD, which I didn't know what the statistics were for that, so that was interesting for me to know. It was quite a nice combination between actual statistics, actual science, as well as like personal experiences. His girlfriend Zara supports him with a lot of these things, and tries to help where she can, and she was trying to help him work out train times. Me and my mum always. And he's missed the train, so he's going to be late for that job he was meant to be doing. And he says that the chaos feels like it's getting worse as he gets older, which I think is a really common experience among ADHDers who weren't diagnosed as a child, or maybe were diagnosed but weren't really supported in the right way to learn how to do these things as adults. We have a bit where he goes for brunch with his girlfriend Zara. He says she's always waiting on me, and that means like time-wise, he's always late. Always late. She always thought that he had ADHD and did her own research on how she could help support him. His forgetfulness, losing things a lot, never finishing projects. He's always overwhelmed. She wants him to have an easier day, an easier life. But she doesn't know how to help him if he doesn't know what's going on and doesn't know how to help himself as well. There's also another scene that's just so funny. Like, I really enjoy the way that they put this documentary together. I think it was actually a really ADHD friendly documentary, which is really funny. We don't spend too long on many scenes. And if we do spend longer in certain scenes, we get a bit of B-roll in between to sort of cut them up into smaller chunks to keep our attention focused. That was really good actually. I didn't notice that, and I've only just put that together. But yeah, there's just a little bit of B-roll put in where he's looking for a drink in his house that he's not even sure he's actually made for himself. We then have him sitting down doing some Google research, and basically it's like, oh, ADHD means your brain works differently. They don't sit there whilst he Googles the whole thing, but he said it would be really boring to watch a 30-year-old man Google ADHD. But he's also not very good at getting appointments and isn't very patient to get like an appointment with his GP to get a referral for a psychologist, I don't know, one of the two. And whilst he's waiting on the phone in the queue to book a GP appointment, like he's all over the place and forgets, and then they hang up before he can like actually answer. And I was just like, what a mood. They gave him like 2 seconds raging, and he was just like screaming like, nah, and I was like, yeah, me, I feel that. He then goes and speaks to a group of people who were diagnosed either in their late teens or in their 20s. I thought it was good that they had a variety of different people there. 3 of them were women of colour, 2 black women, and an Asian woman, and then there was a white dude. And it was good to hear a little bit about each of their individual experiences of ADHD, and then also what things of their ADHD affected them the most. They talk about the white boy stereotypes as well, which also like kind of confuses me of how Sam didn't get diagnosed, how nobody picked that up, because he's relatively stereotypical in his presentation of ADHD, particularly being a cis white man. But there are some things later on in the documentary that make me think maybe that's why he wasn't diagnosed. But I'll get to that. They also talked about different experiences on medication as well. Some people found it really useful, other people found that it really worsened their anxiety. What if you're both? And he asked them if any of them could go back to before they were diagnosed, before they knew they had ADHD, would they? And none of the people in that room wanted to go back to not knowing they had ADHD, and they all actually wish they had known sooner. And after that he said, when you speak to other people it makes you feel like you're part of something. I don't think I realised until today that I feel isolated, that I'm on my own, but I'm not. And I just really think that's a really wonderful thing for him to admit and say in this documentary, because I feel like that's how a lot of us feel when we don't know or aren't sure about those things. And once we find other people like us who have similar experiences to us of whatever condition or neurotype that we've got going on, that feeling of isolation and loneliness kind of dissolves, because you know there are other people, not only just like generally out there, but who could be in your life, who can actually relate and maybe even help at times. He then decides it's time to go and talk to family. So he goes to see his mum Karen. And his first remark is, oh, it's clean in here, Mum. And she goes, that's because you're not staying here. ADHD, innit? So they sit down to have a talk, and she basically says she knows nothing about ADHD. She has no idea. She asks, what is the point of a diagnosis? Which, like, the things his loved ones say to him and about him are not great, but they're definitely not as bad as some things I have heard. So there is a lot of this, like, it can be hard to watch, but also it's important for this documentary because it literally points out, you know, maybe why people didn't get diagnosed as kids, because maybe their parents had these thoughts and feelings, and the lack of education that a lot of parents had to kids who were born in the 90s and earlier. It's good to highlight that and also show if, like, what the responses or the progress is after assessment and stuff like that. He talks about how much he was struggling in school. He also says he doesn't remember anything about his childhood, as she lists off countless things that he said and did as a kid or as a teenager. He's like, I don't remember any of that, which I think is really interesting. That maybe, like, I'm not saying Sam does or does not have trauma, absolutely not, but I just wonder that maybe it's just ADHD that makes a lot of us not remember our entire lives. Because I really struggled when it came to filling in my autism assessment as well as my ADHD assessment. It took a lot of work for me to either talk to family or look at old reports and things to try and put those pieces together for my assessments. And, like, she was saying that she didn't think he had any issues, and he was like, no, I really struggled in school, actually. I really struggled with friendships and relationships. I really struggled with the work. I just kind of coasted by and nobody else really noticed. And that's something he also said in I'm a Celebrity, is that he kind of got, like, reasonably average scores in school. And, like, that's something that I also relate to a lot. I was never really bad enough to require interventional support, according to the staff. You can probably look at one of my last videos talking about my autism assessment forms and you'll see the hypocrisy and absolute ridiculousness of it all. But also, I wasn't this gifted child's kind of energy. I wasn't a savant in any way. I kind of just coasted by because there were a lot of things about the education system I did not like, really struggled with, but then there were other things that I did a lot better in, so they kind of evened each other out to be kind of average. His mum then says, I don't think there's anything wrong with you. As a mother, I would be devastated with you having a label put on you. And that's the problem. That's the problem. The problem is, you see, like, a lot of people see labels as bad, as a flaw, where it's actually like, hey, here's some information about your life that you've been missing, and here's now the way to open some doors so you can actually find some useful coping mechanisms or even support. I don't want to sit here with my 1,000,001 labels of chronic illnesses, but if I didn't, I'd be dead. Okay? I would not be here. And then, like, she also seems very anti-medication. Yeah, it was very frustrating to watch. And Sam's response, he's been saying a lot in I'm a Celebrity that he's very, like, conflict avoidant, so maybe that's why, but also he seems to have had, like, a really good level-headed response to the people in his life who he loves but maybe don't really understand what or why he is doing this for. And he said, I would really like to not stress over little things. I'd really like to be able to listen to Zara, his girlfriend. I want to be a good boyfriend. And then when they're talking about meds, and he was saying, like, I'd like to at least try medication, see if it would help me or be suitable for me. And it's like, there's this whole big, like, weird conspiracies theory kind of vibe of, like, oh, you take this medication and it completely changes your entire personality. And it's like, highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. So that makes him worry a bit about even trying medication at all. And he's like, well, what if I never get back to the way I was? And yeah, my note was like, that's not how that works. You don't take one ADHD pill and then you're never the same again, even when you stop. He then is talking about how overwhelming it is to think about and he is struggling to sleep because it's just so overwhelming and just going around in his brain a lot. And that's something that I can also really relate to, that anytime people just try to, like, anyone who kind of comes across with a bad faith question of like, well, what is ADHD then, or what is autism like? And it's like, it is so expansive. I cannot just tell you in a few sentences. It affects every part of my life, good and bad, and just differently to other people, not necessarily, you know, neutrally as well as just positively and negatively. So I understand that whole, like, this in itself is so overwhelming, I don't know how to deal with this or process this. So he goes to TikTok to see people's experiences, and it's like, yeah, that's kind of where a lot of it started for a lot of adults who are now diagnosed with ADHD and autism, is that we finally got to see other people who are like us and can explain to us why we are like that. And there was just something about the TikTok algorithm that was just so intelligent that even if you had absolutely no suspicions of being autistic or ADHD or anything like that, it would come up on your timeline. It would come up. So he's finding the videos easier to understand than like NHS web pages, and that's something as well why I'm here, why I do this, and why I talk about some complex things and write easier read versions of complex things when it comes to medical stuff, is that it's not easy to just consume and understand a lot of these medical and professional resources, especially when they don't even really fully understand what it's like to live as a person with a different neurotype or a chronic health condition. So I really liked that he said that. I like that he said, I'm finding these videos so much easier to comprehend, understand and digest versus all of this other bullshit online from all the official pages. He did say that he was concerned about self-diagnosing because a lot of these problems are generic that everyone experiences, and that's when my mental response was, yeah, but does it disrupt your life? Because that's when it becomes something that's not just generically experienced by everybody else. Like, he's talked about how this stuff affects his life constantly. He's talked about how it is a stressor for him, a stressor for his relationships, a stressor on like whether he's going to be able to keep a fucking job or not because he can't turn up on time and he can't even remember to pack 2 socks. Forgot to feed the fucking cat, you know? He then has his GP appointment, and the GP actually seems really chill. He clearly has a very nice GP. Where are they? Can we get some more of those? And she said something that I think was really great. She said that basically a lot of adults realise they have things like ADHD and autism as adults, because they are now the ones in charge of their own routine rather than their parents being in charge of their routine, or like schools and stuff being in charge of their routine. You're the one now responsible for everything. And like, I really wish more people had that kind of response from a GP rather than I don't think so, you don't look autistic, you're not like hyperactive. You know, she gave him I don't know whether it was the AQ10 or whatever, but she gave him like a tick box sheet exercise basically, and it was for children, but he didn't even realize it was for children. He was marking it for him now, and she was like, oh, this is for children, like for when you were a child. And he was like, oh, I didn't even notice that. And she was like, well, that in itself is interesting. So like, I enjoyed those moments of like humor and irony as well, and making that interaction between patient and GP feel a little bit less rigid and daunting. I just wish that more GPs were like that. She then has the NHS versus private diagnosis discussion and says that there is a very long wait list for NHS diagnoses. It's still something like 3+ years for most areas in the UK. Private is incredibly expensive, and he was so shocked at how much it was, and it's usually somewhere from 1k upwards, and both of them agreed that that is not right, okay or fair, that this is the way things are. However, he was very hung up on the money, and I was like, my guy, you are made in Chelsea. You already had family money. You are a TV personality and a radio host. You make money. We've just been inside your nice little house. You can spare a K. You know, you can spare a couple K. He then goes to speak to a friend of his called Pete. I have no idea who this person is. Like I said, I don't really know anything about Sam Thompson except from what I've seen on I'm a Celebrity and now this documentary, really. But he goes to talk to Pete, who is like complete opposites to Sam in personality. Sam seems to be really drawn to people who are like very opposite to him, because it's the same in I'm a Celebrity. He loves Tony, and Tony is very deadpan, serious, lower energy. Pete is way more logical and really doesn't care about the stigma, which I really liked. I was really glad that Sam has a friend like that, who can kind of cut through some of the shit that his mum has said and maybe even Zara has said. He talks about, you know, the benefits. Why wouldn't you want to know if you've got ADHD? And he said, I find you very chaotic. And then Sam says, oh, I find you really calming. And he just went, well, probably because I don't have ADHD. And he was like, you're not normal, but that's not a bad thing. Who the fuck wants to be normal? And I was like, go off, Pete. Yeah. More people need a Pete as well. And he says, as horrible as I am to you, I wouldn't want you to change, but I want you to be able to make your life easier. And I was like, yeah, icon. Sam does decide to go private for a diagnosis. And I'm like, good, that makes sense. Why take up a spot on the waiting list when you have the means to go privately? Especially when you're doing this documentary. You can't wait 3 or 4 or more years for an NHS diagnosis. You're filming a documentary. And he's seeing Dr. Jessica Eccles, who I'm sure I've talked about a few times on here, but not a whole lot. But basically she is, I don't know whether she's technically based in Brighton, but she works at Brighton University. She does a lot of studies of the link between neurodiversity, neurodivergence, and hypermobile disorders and connective tissue disorders. But she is a neuropsychologist, and yeah, like her big specialisms are neurodivergence and hypermobile EDS types of disorders. So he's gone to her for an ADHD diagnosis, or like a general psychological assessment, to see what else comes out of it. So she says like other things might come up in this assessment, and it's like 2 to 3 hours long. Very thorough. So they go through all of that, and she's like, yeah, you were definitely ADHD. And he's like, so happy. He's so happy. He feels relieved. But also, babes, you have autism features. It's his preference for sameness and his sensitivity to noises. So I don't know whether it's necessarily enough to classify him as autistic, but there's some tism going on. There's some tism. I'm a Celebrity is now over, but there were some other things that he said whilst he was on there that did sound quite autistic. And one of them he said quite a few times, particularly near the end, is that he's a really picky / fussy eater. And that's really common. I feel like there's a lot of signs that maybe he didn't even think were relevant, which is where I tend to find that these kind of diagnostic tests kind of fail or fall a bit short. Because if you go into an assessment like that with, you know, you have the idea of, yes, I think I'm ADHD, but you could possibly be all these other things. But if you don't know certain things are relevant, or particularly when it comes to autism, usually you don't really read or understand the questions being asked to you in the way that it is meant to be understood and answered. You're probably not going to end up answering those questions in a way that actually really accurately diagnoses you. So I think that's another thing I would like to see more of, is more of that kind of conversation and exploration into that. I know this was a documentary on ADHD, but yeah, I don't know. It's just another one of those things that I would like to see more of, and this next bit too. But also he has signs of a tic disorder. He does a lot of blinking, and you can kind of like notice it when you watch him doing things. And yeah, that's another thing that she studies, and another thing that is very common among ADHD, autistic, hypermobile people is tic disorders. Also, I'm really sorry if that's not the right terminology for that. It's another thing that I personally don't know a whole lot about. So if there's a better phrasing rather than tic disorders, please do let me know. And he starts tearing up and crying because he's just like so overwhelmed but also relieved. And like, he doesn't take any of this news badly either. He's just kind of like, oh, okay, that came out of left field, didn't realise that that was on the table. And afterwards he's talking to the camera, he's like, it's just really nice to know it's not bad. Actually no, he says this to her, I think. I think that's a really big and heavy statement. It's just really nice to know it's not bad. Because I think that's a really big thing for a lot of ADHD autistic people. I'm sure many other neurodivergent people and chronically ill people, etc. It's that all of these things that are signs and traits of disability have always kind of been covertly labelled as bad, like morally wrong. And it's just like, those are just things. They are just a fact of life. Like, yes, you can definitely be morally wrong as a person with these conditions or neurotypes, but the thing itself is not morally wrong. He's talking to Zara again. He says, I'm actually autistic. I'm on the spectrum. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't see that one coming. And he seems really accepting of this. His girlfriend also seems really accepting of this, and she feels like she can be more understanding of him and learn how to be more accepting, and that they can work together on this more rather than her feeling like she is doing all of the labour for him. Because like, this is the thing, is that now he has more of an understanding of the kinds of struggles he may be having in his life, because he's been told, you have ADHD, autism, signs of autism, and a tic disorder. He can now do what he deems appropriate for those things next, whether it's medication, coaching, therapy, just more of his own research, reaching out to more people with these neurotypes, or, you know, just doing more that he can then find what will be suitable for him in his life, and not just like kind of chaotically just carrying on and his partner picking up the pieces. I am also quite wary of like saying things like that, because it does feel kind of like, oh, he's a burden to his partner, and it's like, that's not what I want to put across in this video. But it is about developing teamwork with your loved ones generally, as well as things that you can do yourself or put in place yourself. And he says, I don't like the idea of getting better, maybe I like the way I am. I'm like, yeah, I feel this. Like I've said to a few people before, I wouldn't change that I'm ADHD autistic. I'd maybe want to change my chronic illnesses that threaten my life all the time. I feel like ADHD and autism are kind of inherently part of who I am, but Zara is hesitant to answer or respond to Sam in that moment. Her answer was a little bit meh, like, I don't know, he didn't say he was gonna leave it all to her forever. It kind of seemed like her response assumed that he was not going to do anything to help himself, but he has been feeling a lot of really negative things about being the way he is his whole life, and he wants to feel better about that. I don't think, you know, saying I don't want to change, I don't want to be different, I don't think that inherently means I don't want to improve my life, our life. But this is where the communication problems happen between neurodivergent people and neurotypicals, because to me it was clear he didn't say those things. To Zara it was not. They also went to meet a couple who are also an ADHD and non-ADHD couple, to talk about their experiences as a couple. They're a TikTok pair. I don't watch them, I don't find them particularly funny, but I think some of their advice and experience sharing was helpful. They also got together before they knew that I don't know if they're married, so I'm not going to say wife, but like the girlfriend and the woman of the pair, they didn't know that she was ADHD until like a couple of years into their relationship. And like once they realized ADHD was a thing, they were able to then like actually work on how they could improve their relationship together. Now they knew what it was, because they were in like a pretty rocky patch before they found out, and finding out improved their relationship because then they actually could see what the problems were and work on that together. The man who doesn't have ADHD said, "You're probably used to the negative always being picked up on," to Sam. And I think that again is another really, really big statement, that yeah, a lot of neurodivergent people, disabled people generally, are very used to hearing only negative things being picked up about them and their behaviour, and never any positives, or very rarely any positives. That was a big thing I mentioned in my video where I was going through school reports. Considering the reports said good things, I don't think they said a lot of those good things to me. But even then it was still a lot of bad things, and this needs improving, they need to try harder doing this, that and the other. So after that, Sam decides he's going to try boxing first, because a lot of people say that exercise is really useful for ADHD, which is so great for the non-physically disabled ADHDers out there, because I would love to exercise, but I can't. But it makes other things worse. He then also is seeing an ADHD coach who introduces him to fidget toys, which was also nice to see that actually, yeah, fidget toys are really useful for things, especially like, I think the way she described it is like it gives you enough stimulation that you can focus on other things, rather than whatever task is happening, you're really struggling to connect with the task because you don't have enough stimulation going on. He then does try medication, and I think it was really interesting. I do think that he may have just been given too high of a dose to start off with. Yeah, he's talking about that experience. At first he says, "I think I feel slower, I feel less scatty," and he felt more able to think clearly and do tasks and finish tasks. But like as the day went on, he found the negative effects were hitting him more, like anxiety and then feeling overwhelmed still, and he couldn't eat or sleep. So he decided to not continue with medication. But it does kind of feel like he was put on too high of a dose. Like I'm doing my retitration now, trying a slightly different medication, and we started off on a really small dose, to the point where I basically didn't feel like I was on any ADHD medication. And only kind of in this last week or so, I've started to feel a bit more like I'm actually on meds again, mentally. But like they're supposed to do it really slowly to avoid this kind of negative impact of side effects. So either you can stop just before like the side effects are getting unmanageable if you go too high, or you can just kind of, you monitor as you up the dose and you can see whether it's aggravating things or not, and you can decide to stop or switch from doing that. But usually the slower you go, the less bad, like the less negative side effects you'll get, unless it's just not the right medication for you. And obviously there are a few other medications out there too, so it does feel a little bit like that does kind of suck. Maybe he should do another documentary where he tries all the different types of ADHD medication and reports back. Because there's ones that aren't stimulants as well. He could try a non-stimulant drug. There are different kinds of stimulants, different stimulants about like have different lengths of time that they work for. You know, I just kind of feel like whoever it was that discussed the medication with him, because I don't know whether he went back to Dr. Jessica Eccles or not, or whether he was just doing that through a different personal service. But generally there was just not enough shared on that information. He didn't talk about what he was put on or what dose he tried, just that he tried a dose and didn't like it. So I think that could have done with a bit more thorough information, more exploring really. He then goes back to talk to his mum after he's found all this out, and she's still being kind of shitty about these labels. And it gets worse when he says he's also autistic. I think it's really impressive that he just goes, yeah, I'm autistic, even though he didn't necessarily meet the full criteria, and that Dr. Eccles just said, you have some signs and traits of autism as well. Yeah, it just impresses me that he goes, I'm autistic. Yes, hello, I am also autistic. But yeah, the stigma got worse when it came to him mentioning autism, and she says, I'm really upset by that. And he tries to explain it. He's telling her it isn't a negative to take medication as well. Like, it helps other people. You know, just because he doesn't want to take them and has found that this medication wasn't suitable for him doesn't mean that meds are bad, and doesn't mean that they don't help other people. Which, again, well, impressive the way he has handled that. And kind of the general closing thoughts were that he likes his brain, accepts himself more now he knows these things, and it feels nice to know himself more and better. And that's something I also feel too, is that when I could finally put kind of like words to my experiences, it felt a lot more safe and empowering to do that, versus when I didn't know, didn't even realise this could be a possibility, and just felt like I was always doing things wrong and that I was just a bad person because people just did not like me. No matter how hard I tried to be nice or a good worker or a good friend, etc, etc, people just really did not. They did not like the vibe I brought. And it feels like me and Sam have had a lot of similar experiences growing up. We also would have grown up in the same time period, with him being like a year or so older than me, but obviously as well very different experiences anyway, based on class, location, gender, and obviously different kinds of schooling as well. Yeah, generally I think overall it was actually a really decent documentary, especially for either people who are new to the idea that they might be ADHD, or for friends, loved ones, family members of newly diagnosed or generally diagnosed ADHDers. It's definitely an easier way to go, hey, this is what my life is like. Watch this documentary made by this person who was trying to figure out if he had ADHD too. It also shows that the experience is not as easy or as straightforward. You know, the idea that ADHD and autism are being overdiagnosed now is ridiculous. Many people are waiting on these NHS wait lists. Many people are waiting on these right to choose wait lists as well for Psychiatry UK and ADHD 360. These are not quick processes. They involve massive amounts of researching, paperwork, form filling, evidence finding, as well as money, time, energy, brain space, which a lot of people don't have, particularly if you're working full-time and you're like a minimum or low wage worker. How inaccessible private diagnosis is, especially if you want a full, just general psychological assessment to see if there's anything else possibly going on, and that meds aren't always a straightforward solution either, or a straightforward process. I do, however, wish that there was more support generally for people who don't have money, because I'm pretty sure on Psychiatry UK you either can get ADHD coaching or therapy or medication. You can't go for both, which sucks. That sucks. Because also majority of therapies aren't that useful unless you're on medication, so it seems a bit silly to be one or the other. But as well, like, if you want to get into exercise, a lot of the times more accessible ways of doing that require a lot more funds, which are not always possible. Like, you know, a gym membership is like, what, £40 a month, if not more than that at the moment, and that's just for a really basic gym membership. It also depends on where you live and other things going on. Like for me, I talk about this a lot. I talked about that like video a while back, of like living rurally is really difficult and a pain in the ass. For ADHD as well in particular, the more barriers are in the way between you and tasks you need to do, the less likely you're going to do those tasks. So for me, money is a barrier. For me, transport and getting somewhere is a barrier. I can't just walk down the road or get a quick bus to go to the gym or something. My health and my fatigue is a barrier. The weather is often a barrier. Going outside is a barrier as well. Speaking to people is a barrier. There are lots of barriers in the way for a lot of people to get or access help or do things that may benefit them. Because like I said, I would love to do more exercise, but there are too many kinds of barriers in the way. I can't foresee myself affording £40 a month for a membership that I may or may not use because I can't get myself out of the house and into a car and then deal with the post-exertional malaise or the energy crash afterwards when I still also need to go and have a shower because I got sweaty in the gym. I think as well, generally a lot of these services do not take that kind of thing into consideration. They do not take different circumstances into consideration many times. They are, like many services, not just ADHD services, are still very basic and one-dimensional because they can't foresee the idea of someone with ADHD also being disabled or chronically ill. They can't foresee someone with ADHD being working class or on a low income. Even though a lot of these statistics have been researched and coming out to prove that actually it's really likely for you to develop things like chronic health conditions if you have ADHD. EDS is very common among ADHDers. Fibromyalgia is also very common among ADHDers. Inflammatory conditions are also very common among ADHDers. And my hypothesis of that is that if your dopamine receptors are not working properly, dopamine helps reduce inflammation. Dr. Eccles, would you like to have a conversation? I have many thoughts. You know, it's also very common for ADHDers to be out of work because they are not reliable enough for a capitalism kind of job. Many ADHDers have to start their own businesses or be freelancers, and even that's really difficult or impossible. Yeah, like there's many more to that as well, but I think that this is a useful tool for people to either reference when they go for an assessment or go to the GP and say, I think I have ADHD, or just to help their loved ones understand what they deal with more. And I do think it would be really useful to have another kind of documentary that's mainstream that kind of actually went through some of the things that people with ADHD or autism, etc., find useful in improving their life and their quality of life. So Sam, hit me up, Sam. I've got so many ideas and I would like to be paid. But yeah, that's my video on that documentary. I think it's worth watching. I think it's worth talking about and sharing with people. I am very impressed with how destigmatizing it kind of is as well, and humanizing it is. Yeah, I definitely think it should be watched, and I mean, send it around to schools, send it around to GPs, make everybody watch it. Just as like a easy introduction to ADHD. Hello? But yeah, that's my video for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to watch and talk about. Is there another documentary kind of similar to this? I like a few Stacey Dooley docs, but I don't know if she's done anything that I would particularly want to discuss here. So if she has, let me know. But yeah, that's my video for this week. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, watch videos, share videos. It all really helps supporting the channel. And yeah, that's kind of it. I'll see you next week. Bye.